The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. By the time I conclude this episode of the Wrestling is Real podcast, this special edition, you might want to make one thing perfectly clear. That now, WWE could basically plan to have talent cuts or talent releases every quarter that they have to report to shareholders. Because that's what's happening now. Every report to shareholders, their quarterly earnings reports, which was done today, prior to the announcement that 18 different superstars have been released from their contracts. So 18 wrestlers, male and female, being dropped. Let's drop the names in real quick. Keith Lee, Karrion Kross, Eva Marie, Nia Jax, Ember Moon, Mia Yim, Harry Smith, Scarlett Bordeaux, B-Fab, Katrina Cortez, Trey Baxter, Franky Monet, Gran Metalik, Jeet Rama, Zayda Ramier, Oney Lorcan, Lince Dorado, and Jessi Kamea. We'll talk about where some of those names, what they stand out, and where, just really the report card of what they did in the time they were in WWE in the first place. We'll talk about that. It's putting on another extensive list, a number of good names that were up on that main roster, or could have been up on the main roster, but are not. But really, it was, again, more of a purge of the NXT of old. The ones that were not going to be brought into the NXT 2.0 fold. That was the plan of all that. And their decision is really, you see, it's not wrestling anymore. I said it yesterday on the program. Like literally 24 hours ago, I recorded a Wrestling is Real podcast, my normal weekly show. And I talked about them. This company's not a wrestling company anymore. It's a sports entertainment company. They're making the choice to do this because now they have an approach on how they want to go ahead and of which wrestlers they want. We're now getting a real apparent idea as to who they want and who are the types of stars that are going to stay. The other thing that happens here tonight with these releases, which only happened about 4 hours ago, we started learning about it and started feeding in. And every wrestling podcaster is out there now getting on and blaring about it. They're talking about the releases. But what I know about this is, to me, this point. It's not only a message to the fact that whatever was being on NXT and the fact that indie talent could have a chance to break into WWE and get their big break. That chance is now a much smaller window than ever before. So if you get the chance to come into WWE, you really have to go needle through a thread. You have to go, how do they always talk about that? Needle in a haystack. You basically have to thread the eye of a needle to be able to make that opening, that little opening right there to get in and become somebody in WWE. So the bar has been lifted to such a level. Now, that doesn't mean anything about these wrestlers and their level of talent and where they are. Mick Foley said it. Renee Paquette said it. Other people have been saying out there, the wrestling community, of the wrestlers and the people that have been behind the scenes in WWE, apparently they're all going to find work. All of them are going to find work. Even as we record right now, Blake Christian, formerly Trey Baxter, immediately has already been booked for a GCW show. Done. It's like they're all going to get booked. All of them. It's just a matter of where. It's really amazing how this compounds with the releases that we had of the entire Ring of Honor roster 1 week ago. This last week has been a fire sale. It's been a purge. I never thought we would get so much happening at the end of the year like this, but their earnings call triggered Ring of Honor's parent company, Sinclair Broadcasting, triggered their changes, making extreme steps to go ahead and release the entire roster of talent. And because of the fact that they were also $12 billion in debt. Because they have another venture going on as a corporation to build their streaming service for their regional sports networks, which we already know they've already put, tens of billions of dollars into that. And they're trying to sign up rights fees, which I read today. They only have 4 baseball teams right now of all the regional sports networks, of which they have, 21? Yeah, they got a lot of money to be spending, and they're not going to spend it on no stinking wrestling show or stinking wrestling promotion, which is why I think the tape library is up for sale, and I think Ring of Honor is going to fold. Meanwhile, if Ring of Honor didn't have to go away, man, they would have a treasure trove of talent to go after. But they weren't going to go for that either. Like, even at the thought that they come back in January, which some people might speculate, they think, oh, well, Ring of Honor, they're coming back. Well, there's a lot of talent to go after out there. They could re-sign some of their talent, or they could re-sign some of these 18 stars right here. Well, we don't know. How many of these stars are going to get TV time again? Because part of it is, well, NWA, remember, all these stars, for the most part, I don't know if they're going to get signed to full-time deals. Who might get signed full-time? I could see where a couple of them do, but I don't know. But for me, I'm thinking about the fact that all these talents, you could see some of them become journeymen, journeywomen, and be seen on television from time to time. They could be brought up for tapings, paid for appearance, and move along. And then that would also just bolster their indie work as well. You could see that happening. There's a lot of those stars right now where if NWA wanted to work by appearance, if MLW wanted to do some work by appearance, you could see that. And then we know we could talk about Japan. We could talk about Mexico. We could look at all of that. And then, of course, the indies, the GCWs, the PWGs, that could also be embedded into the mix of who they could go after. Because there's a lot of talent here that got that exposure in WWE in some way, shape, or form. Badly used for most of them. Poorly constructed or given some gimmicks that were just illogical. It didn't work. When they were not necessary either. We kind of can say all of that. But I want to get into the business side of it and just explain what other podcasters are going to do. They're going to go line by line about all the stars. Okay? You want to go through that? I could do that real quick and make the point. But I think there's more to the story that we need to go and bring up and just talk about where we are in the whole crux of what WWE is doing and where they are heading. Because this is a change of corporate. This is another thing where, as a sign of change, as a sign of rebuilding, this is where we're learning a lot of things, where Nick Khan is being much more hands-on. It's apparent. Every quarters call, so every 3 months, WWE must go ahead and report their earnings, report the state of the company to the shareholders that are spending millions of dollars on their stock price. And that the company is going to do very well, regardless of what they're doing with their broadcast deals, regardless of what they're making on merchandise, on other deals they're working on right now, partnerships. We talked about the NFT partnership just created. All this. Their broadcast partners, who are also publicly traded, are expecting the partnership with WWE to be successful. Remember, it's not even just WWE's anymore. They're in marriage with basically Fox and NBC Universal. For the amount of money that's being invested, NBC Universal and Disney, which owns Fox, they can't afford to be in bed with a company like WWE and also see them fail. It's such a big entity that, you would not think it would ever do that, but these corporations want to be able to go and monetize the asset they have with having WWE on board. And WWE is doing what they're needing to do to insatiate their broadcast partners, to make sure that SmackDown and Raw, that they're doing the right by making sure those shows are replenished with talent. Are they doing any better with the creative side? Well, I guess if they just feel like if they just get fresh faces out there, that will change the whole scope of what they're going with. The other thing I want to make mention of is not only is there now a narrow window of success, a very narrow chance of making it onto the main roster and being successful, and a narrow chance of getting onto NXT 2.0 if you're indie talent. The other thing it does is this is a glaring blow to the roster in the back. To all the backstage people, catering, whatever you're doing right now in terms of working Raw or SmackDown or working main event or whatever. It's a heightened sense of alert now. just about everybody is expendable. It's like a fantasy draft. Okay, you might have 1 or 2 stars that are not expendable. They cannot be released. To me, that's Roman Reigns and Becky Lynch. Otherwise, everybody else is expendable. I would like to think that Sasha Banks is not expendable. I'd like to think that Charlotte Flair probably is not expendable either. Seth Rollins, Edge. I mean, there's still quite a few names on that main roster that are not expendable. They just cannot be without. But obviously, there's about 90% of that roster. Maybe take away 8 to 10 people that could absolutely be saved. But I can believe that WWE feels like they can find stars to replace everybody. The other thing you got to take into account as well is in the releases they've done. When we talk about what they've done with terms of releases earlier this year, remember, you just got to look at the quarters. Back in June, we were on this, and we got to this point again, where we had several stages of that. So let's go back to June real quick, because there is a trend that's happening here as well that I need to make sure everybody knows about and they see what's happening. So I talked about episode 617, WWE Release Roulette. And I look at the names that were let go. At this point, there was so many that were actually, this was another part I wanted to bring up. Here we go. Comicbook.com actually had a full list of who was released. I don't know if it's been updated, but this is the most recent list that we had before. Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Lana. Keep in mind of this. A number of these stars that we're talking about, remember I talked about the Olympic Village aspect, where a lot of stars, a lot of wrestlers were dating other stars. And there's only a handful of people who have been able to do that. John Cena and Nikki Bella, they never broke that off. It kind of broke off itself. Becky Lynch, Seth Rollins, obviously they're married. They have a child. And they're definitely both together in the company, working on the same brand, as a matter of fact. You had Lana and Rusev. You had Aleister Black and Zelina Vega. And then you look at, there's others that probably are out here that I don't know, that I don't remember if they were with anybody at all. Chelsea Green, who was with Matt Cardona, but, Zack Ryder's been away for a long time now anyway, from WWE, right? Long enough. And then you go back, Bo Dallas, Mojo Rawley, Velveteen Dream. You see, there's a lot of names that have been here that have not been heard about for a while. Alexander Wolf. We also had Ezra Judge, who's now EJ Nduka over at MLW. I forgot he was part of the WWE as well, or part of the Performance Center. Scholar Story, which was Brandy Loren of Evolve and Shine. Vanessa Bourne, I haven't heard from her on any TV shows. Lars Sullivan, Andrade, who is in a relationship with Charlotte Flair. Like, there's a lot of those wrestlers that were broken off. Remember, there was a lot of wrestlers that were broken off that were in relationships. Same thing happens here. Because in this current list, you have Karrion Kross and Scarlett Bordeaux together as a couple, engaged. They're both gone. Keith Lee, Mia Lim, together. They're both gone. Franky Monet, married to John Morrison, gone. It just rolls down like that. That Olympic Village mentality is being eradicated. So don't even worry about any kind of morals clause. The fact that if you are dating or you are, confabbing with people within the roster, any employee relations, they're just going to nix it in the bud. So don't even think about that. If you're coming into this brand, you have to understand the level of expectations that are expected of you, regardless if the company does good by you or not. But then, at any time, your contract doesn't mean you have to be there. They could cut you. Because that independent contractor deal that you have, they can create the release. So how many people right now are feeling scared and realizing this is happening too much? What happens the next quarter if we get a little slowdown? Because the fourth quarter is going to have a little bit of a drop off. It will include Crown Jewel, You'll get the residuals back from that. You'll have Survivor Series to come back from that. Otherwise, what else do you get? So if the revenue that they get for the quarter drops in the fourth quarter, well, do we get some more people coming up in January that will also be released just before the Royal Rumble? Ask yourself that. You also got to figure out how many people, how are they going to get 30 people to be in that Royal Rumble match coming up in January? That's going to be something else. 30 men and women in individual matches. I imagine they're going to have to drop the Royal Rumble match down to 20 names because I don't know if they're going to have enough names that are going to be good enough to bring out. But that's where they are. So Wrestling Observer put a pretty extensive story about where they are in terms of quarter three. So the time they've had between July and the end of October and what they've made in money. Well, let's look at some of the things that have happened. They got back to touring. Touring started at the start of the quarter. They had SummerSlam. They have had the season's premieres for SmackDown and Raw. How you want to respect those. They had the draft. They had the King of the Ring, Queen's Crown tournament. But again, they had all the debuts, all the momentum coming back of getting the shows back up post Thunderdome era is all completely reflected here in this third quarter. So because their traveling schedule's back up on board again, it's not completely full speed, but it's back to where it was, back to something more of what they're used to doing. Their third quarter revenues were up 15%. Year over year. The quarterly investors' call included Vince and Stephanie McMahon, President Nick Khan, and others expressing happiness with the company's current financial position and as expected, optimistic about the future. No questions about AEW. Nobody bothered doing that. Let's get into the part of Nick Khan. Nick Khan was bullish on the company's prospects when it comes to the next round of TV rights deals. So what they're talking about is, 2023, I think, is the end of this current deal, or, yeah. What they want to do is that the WWE as a sports franchise is undervalued because they feel like the deals coming up right now for the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, some of the broadcast rights deals are going to go ahead and boost up. And with everything that's going on right now with WWE, they understand live sports is important, and their product is considered live sports. That's the way they're branding themselves. That's the way they're presenting themselves. Even if it is an entertainment product, it's still a sports-related product. It's not a wrestling product. They're kind of basically, they want to basically look at themselves as combat sports in a soap opera form. It's not wrestling with locks and holds and hook a leg, bro. None of that. No high spots, none of it. There's only a couple of stars that get to be allowed to do that because that's their craft, that's their novelty to give them some dimension when they can't maybe necessarily do a great promo or not allowed to be cutting great promos or whatever it might be. Now, he points to several new rights deals coming up, including the Premier League, which is the big soccer league in the UK. And the importance of live programming is a key reason for that. That they're just as bullish for the next round of negotiations as they were for the last. So the thing is, they're going to make more money. They already made the new agreement with Peacock, NBC Universal, and Disney, owning Fox. They can try to ask for more money. And that's what they're going to plan to do. But they still have to go and build themselves up. But there's a lot of things, a lot of integral relationships, advertising deals that are happening as a result of all this. Market placement, all the opportunities they have, product placement. There's a lot of things that you're able to do to help boost up. Even though the ratings might not look great, it is a lot of cross-promotion, a touring schedule for all these shows to promote the fact that they're on Fox or on USA or on Peacock, for that matter. For NBC Universal, trying to just maintain some kind of an audience and the demographic they're trying to reach on USA, plus the Peacock deal, and to be able to go and sustain and retain subscribers is important for Peacock. That's what's also important for them. Then you have Fox and Disney, where SmackDown, you're given a Friday night primetime deal, and they're sustaining. Remember, they only got to about 4 million viewers at the highest end on the very initial episode. But to go ahead and have a consistent 2.0 to 2.5 million viewer audience of a younger demographic works out. Because what else is Fox going to put on a Friday night that's going to, do the same thing? Sure, they could put scripted programming out there, but it doesn't do as well because Fox only has certain programming that will push out a good audience. And for them, Fox is pretty good. So they have that. Now there's other rights deals coming up pretty soon. The second day rights. These next day delay episodes of Raw with Hulu are going to be up in the later half of 2022. Because remember, Raw is not just going to be made available on demand with anybody. They make it on demand on Hulu. So Hulu could step up for more money. They might step up on Hulu for more money for that. Of which that's Disney that owns that. So they could do something there. But they don't know if Hulu might remain in the mix. They can make it where it's on Peacock. They could do a lot of different things. Whatever they want. Because now they're not beholden to their own wrestling, the WWE Network. They're making it a big deal for people to go and watch this show. And for Nick Khan, they're basically thinking, well, what's the better place to get more exposure for the on-demand part of the product to really get people to watch? If they're not going to catch the show first run Monday or Friday nights. Nick Khan also said international restrictions on travel have slowed down rights negotiations in other countries, but that's also speeding up. And that the SummerSlam weekend and a return to more robust live touring scheduling helped a year-over-year increase of $34 million. Vince McMahon said the return to touring is where the company, quote, comes alive in so many respects. There's also talk about intellectual property. And they talked about the evolution of sports entertainment. Khan talked about the IP wheel, citing the Undertaker New Day content on Netflix, the upcoming McMahon Netflix docuseries, and they want to increase value while finding new revenue streams. Yeah. Find new pipelines for revenue. It's not about the wrestlers. The wrestlers are just property. They're just cogs in a wheel. They're hamsters on a wheel running the ship, making sure this thing runs wherever they want it to go. Now, the other thing that Nick Khan brings up here is an explanation for why they have so many stadium shows next year, which was very interesting when they decided to make that announcement last week. Became the secondary story on the Wrestling Gazette podcast last week. You can hear that from last week's show. He says they went under, Nick Khan saying they underwent a strategic examination of their pay-per-view model, making changes to focus not just on making the content special, but surrounding the events for their big stadium shows. And they were finding that Saturdays when lots of visitors are expected in the cities for big events. So making money on big gates. So if they can make it where they can do more WrestleManias and SummerSlams and Royal Rumbles types events in big venues and adding more of them, they want to be more on the gate, more on the merchandise. It works for them. There were other things they talked about where the date for the Royal Rumble, they wanted to make sure it was not going up against the Winter Olympics and their partners at NBC Universal. They talked about Atlanta Hawks star player Trae Young being involved in a storyline to hype up the New Year's Day 1 show in Atlanta at State Farm Arena. They're very bullish right now. WWE is in the trading card market, getting multiple bids before they think on Panini is the best partner for them. The NFT market, which we talked about on the show yesterday. Then they have a March launch for WWE's 2K22 video game. Stephanie McMahon chimed in on the call saying that there's no reason WWE can't be generating hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising and sponsorship over the next 3 to 5 years. Also made mention they boasted that they were the number one sports brand on TikTok with nearly 50 million followers. And Nick Khan also commented about being happy about the NXT relaunch. Several call-ups have already happened. Recruiting effort led by Triple H and Bruce Pritchard is focused on young athletes. Which also has to be said about some of the stars that got released today as well. Because, if they're not being put on the main roster, why are they in NXT? You want young talent NXT. And that's where they're trying to go at right now. which is what they've been focusing on as we speak. Now, Fightful.com did a really good job of quickly giving a little bit of information as the status of all the releases that happened today. So here's what we got so far. By the way, Scarlett and Karrion Kross debuted May of 2020. Wasn't that long ago? And all of a sudden, also during the pandemic, unfortunately. But we have this going on here, and you want to talk about one of the stars, two of the stars that really just got the shaft all the last 2 years in general. Now, I also want to talk about the wrestlers. So here we go. So Scarlett Bordeaux, I'm not going to just call her Scarlett. Scarlett Bordeaux, the Smoke Show, she even announced on Twitter, is back. Could she go back to Impact Wrestling? I mean, some of the stars Impact Wrestling lost, think about it like this. I think it was just contracts that were being gone. I don't think it was any animosity or any bad blood, but there's a number of stars that can make their way back to Impact Wrestling. Scarlett Bordeaux was making a good name for herself. She made a name for herself that made her very viable in the eyes of WWE, even after Karrion Kross. Because Karrion Kross, hey, to his credit, Scarlett just did not come as part of the deal with Karrion Kross. No. Scarlett Bordeaux was recognized for her own individual talent because as the Smoke Show, not only was she doing good with the whole Smoke Show gimmick and Impact Wrestling, which was really a fun gimmick, she was also really good in ring and did a lot of good work in there. Also working a little intergender, working with the Disco Inferno and the likes of that, and doing pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed what they were doing. Remember, I think didn't she wrestle Johnny Swinger too? It's one of those things, because those guys were working with each other. That was kind of a goofy kind of thing, but good comedy, and nevertheless. So Scarlett Bordeaux could very well go back to Impact Wrestling if the room is there for her. I mean, they are pretty loaded with a lot of stars there, but, there can be some changes that can be made. There's some room for more stars to be brought in. Like, Impact Wrestling could absolutely take advantage of some of these stars if they want to, but, I don't know if they're going to want to or not. I think Impact Wrestling, they've taken on so much talent right now in the first place. They are no longer dealing with the partnership with AEW, so they could very much, not even worry about that. The other thing, too, is that I don't think there's anything where AEW can pick up any talent right now. I just think it's just they'd have to unload to bring on anybody out of this roster release if they were going to do this. I don't see where any of those stars might do that right now. I don't know yet, but. So Scarlett Bordeaux, expect her somewhere. She originally worked the Ring of Honor, so no way for her to go back there, but there's a lot of places for her to go. She's very talented. And it'll be back to see her on TV. It'll be great to see her back on TV again anyway, because the absence didn't make any sense to me. But they obviously never wanted to put Karrion Kross and Scarlett together on the main roster. That was probably never going to be the plan. Maybe it was never going to be the plan. I don't know. But they never decided to do that. Franky Monet, which now I'm just happy just for the fact that we don't have to call her Franky Monet anymore, because I hated that name. I hated the gimmick, honestly. I mean, listen, Taya Valkyrie, love this woman. She's talented as shit. It's talent as fuck. Just amazing. Great work in Impact Wrestling. Great work in AAA. So immediately, if Taya Valkyrie gets to do anything, La Huera Loca needs to go back to Mexico. AAA needs to go ahead and get her back out there working for them again. And maybe Impact will take her back on, because why not? I mean, how about an immediate opponent for Mickie James as champ? That'd be pretty good. Right now, they're already going to set up Mercedes Martinez to go up against Mickie James. That's why I didn't start the recording until after 10 o'clock, because I wanted to watch Impact Wrestling tonight and see the after effect of all the things that were going on there, as they're setting up for Turning Point coming up in a couple weeks. So Taya Valkyrie signed with the company in February 2021. She's only there for 9 months. Wow. She debuted in NXT in April, challenged for the NXT Women's title on NXT, and that was it, against Raquel Gonzalez. And then the following week, she lost to Cora Jade. Sayonara, bye-bye. Adios. It's a shame. So damn talented. So Taya Valkyrie was a good egg. I mean, she's going to find work. My God, she's got to be able to find work. She is so damn talented. She's great in the ring. She's a good talker. I like all that she's done. I thought that her work in Wrestle House was great. The work that she'd had with Rosemary was fantastic. Need a good heel like Taya Valkyrie back somewhere. She's got to find some work in the company. Maybe NWA would take, like, this is where NWA should take a little bit of a look at some of these stars. Like even an MLW, man. Like you got some stars you're trying to build up for your featherweight division for the women, but man, you got some stars here that you could absolutely bring on board. Like yours just is. Ember Moon signed. Now this is one of the more seasoned veterans on the roster. Was on the main roster. Worked double time in NXT. 2 different stints with them. Signed in September 2015. She's a former NXT Women's Champion and NXT Women's Tag Team Champion. Lost to Mandy Rose of Toxic Attraction on the October 5th episode of NXT. Out. Ember Moon, also very good. I can see where an Impact Wrestling wants to bring her on. Or an NWA. I mean, she could also be back on television somewhere, someplace. I think that can always be accommodated for her. But she'll definitely find work. Good superstar as well. Oney Lorcan. He signed with the WWE in September 2015. Very early on, a very while back. You know, post the Horsewomen, post the Shield and the Wyatt family. These were the crop of stars that were heading NXT, and Oney Lorcan worked with Danny Burch for a long time in tag team action. Was a former NXT tag team champion with Danny Burch. Last wrestled on the September 28th episode of NXT, losing to Zion Quinn. So, a number of these stars were all taking jobs on the way out. So they were doing the diligence on the way out as they left. There you go. B-Fab, part of Hit Row, she's out. And I really don't know how much of a career she had prior to coming in. I think she was just right from the Performance Center and then inserted into Hit Row. Never really had a chance, but still very much green, we saw. And, you know, this is where Hit Row is going to make a whole lot of changes now. Even after introducing them 3 weeks later, the Hit Row concept is getting blown up. But like I said before, I mean, some people might say Isaiah Swerve Scott needed Hit Row. I don't think so. And listen, Isaiah Swerve Scott, you know, I just think he didn't need him anyway. He didn't need the entourage. Didn't need it. But now that's a 3-man team. I still think it's going to be a couple of those names. I don't know if Adonis or Top Dollar staying around with him. Just saying. Jessi Kamea signed with the company in 2017. Lost to Raquel Gonzalez on the way out on the August 24th episode. Zayda Ramier. She teamed up with Zoe Stark against The Way and lost. And that was the last time she was wrestling June 1st NXT. Formerly Blake Christian, who worked in Impact Wrestling, I believe, or at least had a stint in Impact Wrestling, and has worked GCW among other places. He signed with the company back in October 2020. Last wrestled in the October 8th episode. Job to Grayson Waller on the way out. Funny how all these stars, they were already getting... We should have actually noticed that on NXT, that some of these stars were going to be on the way out anyway, but we knew that was going to happen. Kind of knew it was going to happen. When you start seeing these certain stars that were prominent on NXT, the 2.0 comes in, they're getting jobbed out. They're becoming enhancement talent for the younger stars. And that's what they are. Lince Dorado. Lince Dorado. He was back in 2016, part of the Cruiserweight Classic. Wrestled on main event a few weeks ago against Cedric Alexander and lost. I don't expect a Lucha House Party reunion anytime soon. Samurai del Sol, formerly Kalisto, debuted in AEW last night. I just think that CMLL, AAA could definitely start calling up Lince Dorado. He can go to Mexico, start right back up. Same thing with Gran Metalik, who was already asking for a release. And he last wrestled on main event, teaming with Lince Dorado against Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza. And they're gone. So Gran Metalik, Lince Dorado, Mexico bound, back home. Could see very well happening that way. Christina Cortez, she did make appearances as Carolina in a team with Sin Cara. I forgot about that. And last wrestled in a match with Saray on episode of 205 Live, so she's out. Jeet Rama signed in 2015, lost to Solo Sikoa on Tuesday night on NXT 2.0. Then you have Keith Lee, signed with the company in 2018. I forget it's been so long. A stand on Ring of Honor. Him and Shane Taylor could always team back up, or Keith Lee can go back out on his own again. I don't see where NWA or somebody else comes out. And again, Keith Lee, I think, gets TV time somewhere. I don't know if Impact Wrestling picks him up. I don't know if MLW or NWA want to pick him up, but there's somebody there that should absolutely go and get a hold of Keith Lee on the phone and see what happens. Eva Marie came back to the company in October 2020. She debuted in June, and she was in a whole deal with Doudrop, as we know, her bringing her way back. But Eva Marie, it's more or less, listen, she made her way back into wrestling, so good for her. Don't know if there was much of a length of time where we're going to actually see her out there, but nevertheless, it happened and done. Nia Jax, that's a real long time name. Originally, I remember watching her NXT in the Palm Beach County Convention Center when they did an NXT show back in 2014 when she was Lena Fanene. I forget who she teamed up with. But Nia Jax then, former Raw Women's Champion, former WWE Women's Tag Team Champion, spent a lot of time on TV. We can always talk about, her work in the ring, how violent she was with certain stars. We can talk about that. And among other things, was taken out by Shayna Baszler in an angle where she was set to miss an undisclosed amount of time. She's out. Mia Yim participated in both Mae Young Classic tournaments. Last time she was out on TV, remember when she was part of Retribution? Quickly gone. December 34th episode of WWE Main Event where she lost to Nikki Cross. Last time she wrestled. That's it. Harry Smith Jr. or David Harsmith, or as we might call him, Davey Boy Smith Jr., over in MLW, returned to WWE in July. Teamed with Austin Theory to defeat Aussie Jones and Zion Quinn in a SmackDown Dark match. Never made it back to the main roster. Never got on the NXT. So, why not see David Harsmith go back to MLW? He could very much go back there, work the Opera Cup. Well, they've already done the Opera Cup taping, so they can't do that, right? That's it. As far as I don't know if there's anybody else that's been let go. I'll keep an eye on the Wrestling Observer. So is anything else that's been brought up yet? But at the moment, I don't think there's any more releases. That's it. And that's what they did. 18 releases today. It was a lot. Big news. Everybody out here. And what can you expect? It's this direction of the company now of where they want to go. As I said, Nick Khan, and this was a story I didn't even bring up, but it got brought up last week. I didn't think of actually bringing it up because it just popped back up into my feed, that he's been a regular presence backstage at WWE shows. WrestleVotes reported that he's been backstage at Friday Night SmackDown. And it's not an uncommon occurrence, they're saying. Ringside News reported that Khan's been seen backstage at a lot of WWE TV lately, and he's becoming a fixture backstage. A 10-year member of the creative team told RSN that Khan being there is not a big deal. But Khan has been reportedly traveling with Vince McMahon so they could take care of business during the trips. And Nick Khan obviously is pretty confident in working with Nick Khan, that Nick Khan's going in the right direction. Business-wise, he is. You might not like to hear that as fans. The fans are fickle today, and you're allowed to be. And for some of those fans, you're going to say, cancel the WWE Network, or this and that. Everybody's going to be pissed. I'm never going to watch wrestling again, or the WWE again. I got it. Okay. You can say all of that. But what are you going to do, man? I mean, it's like This company is going to run like a company now. It's very apparent. And this is where they're going to go with things. They don't want to do anything else. They're going to be freewheeling about whatever changes they need to make. They're very aggressively moving. This company's not dormant anymore. What's really happening is on the business side of WWE, they are being very aggressive on new deals, new ventures, new revenue pipelines. That is the Nick Khan thing. And also the people he brought on board. Remember these other vice presidents he brought on board that are part of his fold that he's brought on board from CAA. So the talent agency aspect of them is working out. They just need to be able to get the talent crafted and worked up to be somewhere they need to be. They're doing a lot more with cross promotion. They're doing a lot more with trying to work out getting their stars up to a certain level. But they also need to find stars that will work very well within the gamut of what they want them to do. I mean, you can see what they're working with. Some of the stars, they decide to go ahead and put their influence and their resources into. You can see it now. We talked about that yesterday. And so they decided to go this route. And I understand why they did. And it's a very interesting day. And the company's going to continue to do this. It's going to make things very interesting for someone like me to continue podcasting about. Because I didn't expect I was going to record a show on a Thursday. But when all this is happening, count myself. And here I am, an extra 40 minutes talking about this. I could do my broadcaster's podcast after this. But I got to go ahead and, rant about this now. And get the word out to you. Because I thought the perspective of what the company's trying to do, why it's happening. It's not just a rampant thing. It's scheduled, it's planned because of the fact that the wrestlers don't know what's going on. They're on notice. Now they have to be aware that any of them, except for a handful of stars, have tenure. Otherwise, the rest of them, they always have to consider they might be 1 foot out the door. They might be on the way out of Titan Towers. Goodbye. Cutthroat business. Some wrestlers are going to respond well to that. And they're going to say, well, that's not going to happen to me. The other thing I think happens as well is all these releases, they can always bring some of these people back. They love bringing people back with a chip on their shoulder. Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre are great examples of that. They have no problem bringing people back with chips on their shoulder, and they could very well do that again. Meanwhile, this is the advantage for the New Wrestling Alliance. Now, that New Wrestling Alliance is much different now because AEW and Impact Wrestling are not necessarily working that invisible door, but that invisible door is there. So AEW could bring some stars into the mix, but I think they've already done what they did. They really picked some of the best of the best. They have made their mark. I don't know if there's much more room to bring anybody in unless they are per appearance deal. But I would imagine if they decide to, to me, of that list, the names that I really want to pay attention to is where Scarlett Bordeaux goes, where Franky Monet goes. Now, let's go Scarlett Bordeaux and Taya Valkyrie. Let's call them by their proper names. And keep an eye on Killer Kross. We don't have to call him Karrion anymore. Killer Kross and Keith Lee. Where do those 4 names go? Because those are the 4 names I'm going to keep my eyes on. Because those names should absolutely be on the minds of Impact Wrestling, MLW, and the National Wrestling Alliance. Why not? Plus, on the women's side, Women of Wrestling could absolutely look at this as well. Does Jeannie Buss want to get involved in this and acquire some of these stars to be brought on board to that brand? Women of Wrestling, the fact you could bring Taya Valkyrie over to work Tessa Blanchard, you're just building an instant feud that helps to build that brand, especially when they get back on TV, already with a storied history with each other. You could definitely go that route. And then allow Taya Valkyrie to continue to work in Mexico, which I know she'll thrive once again if she gets a chance to go back. I don't even see why she couldn't go back. That's it. I'm going to leave it there. Jesus. This year of wrestling is something else. Man, I wonder what's going to happen between before the end of the year. Because at some point, right after Thanksgiving is when I start doing my best of stuff, which I expect to be 4 parts and to go through the entire year, which there's a lot to talk about this year. And this year has not stopped, man. This has been a newsworthy year of epic proportions, and it just doesn't stop. We still have Full Gear next week. We got Survivor Series the week after that. We got Ring of Honor's Final Battle to come up as well. Like, there's a lot of crap left to go through here. And NXT also doing a takeover show. Don't know if it's going to be called Takeover, but we got that also coming up. A lot year left before we get to the holidays. There's a lot left to go. Oh, by the way, Impact Hard to Kill 2022, January 8th is now being announced to be at the Factory in Dallas, Texas. Bring that point across as well. All right. I got to do my Broadcasters podcast next. I'm going to take a break, grab some water, set up. Already I'm all set up for that. Just going to, take a breather, talk about it next. But we're going to close out this Wrestling is Real podcast. Thanks for listening in. Come back next week for another, I'm sure will be another newsworthy Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.